Things Will Be Different is a low-budget film about a brother and sister who use a strange time anomaly to hide from the authorities, and ultimately end up trapped. There's a strong mystery element to what's going on, so let's dive in and see if it hits the landing. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We watch a movie, we talk about it, it's that simple. And today, we're looking at our fairly recent release. I mean, I knew this was recent-ish. I didn't realize it was actually 2024. I thought it was maybe a year or two ago. I mean, it's actually 2025 now, but still, we're just into 2025, right? Well,
it doesn't count.
I'm not used to being in 2025 yet. It's like the 5th of January. Anyway.
It's that period when you were back in school, you would start writing 4 and then have to scratch it out and put 5.
Yeah. Because having to write the date every day in school is when the transition would feel at its most volatile. I've not had to write a date down though in literally decades at this point.
I mean, I've had to write dates down, but like it's always been digital. I could just backspace and no one has to know.
Yes, of course. So yeah, we're talking about a movie called Things Will Be Different today, which we'll get into what it's about and whatnot, but we will start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers, and of course if you're enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch, and you can get bonus shows over on our Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So I knew very little about this going in, so I'm going to keep this fairly light on spoilers, just to say that a brother and sister, adult brother and sister characters who have been a part of some kind of bank robbery go to lay low in a house where they seem to have information that makes this house unique, and it takes them into what seems to be some kind of time bubble or alternate timeline, and then things do not go well from there. We'll just say
in a very sci-fi way.
Yes. So that's the basic premise. I'll leave it at that because I feel like it would be very easy to dip into spoilers from there. But that's the gist of it. So directed by Michael Felker, who interestingly, there's an actor who pops up in this who's one of the duo from Something in the Dark, The Endless, Synchronic, those movies. That's not actually a surprise, because the director and writer of this was the editor on all of their previous movies, or most of the previous movies anyway, from a glance. Yes. So I was thinking early on in this movie, this feels like something those two guys would make, but it's not their movie. And then it's like, oh, he works with them though.
Yeah, he's got that vibe.
He's one of their offspring, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah. So if you know those movies, this might have a sort of similar tone or kind of sci-fi concept. Along the lines of what you expect from their stuff, and in particular the stuff where those actors would also star in the movies. Synchronic was a little bit different because it was like, hey, Anthony Mackie is the lead in this, and it's like a big boy movie.
Right.
But all right. Well, without further ado, David, what did you think of Things Will Be Different?
Well, just to pivot off what you were saying there, is I didn't actually know that this was related to specifically Something in the Dirt, because that's the only one I've seen from that pair. But as I was watching it, I was thinking about that a lot. Like I felt that throughout this so much. And I was a little bit more positive on that movie than you were, but that was mainly just because of I like the genre savviness that it was going with. It wasn't so much a style thing that was really the difference between us. Anyway, when it comes down to this movie, though, I liked a lot of it. I liked the concept of it, and I like how the first act, which is a very long first act, really sets everything up and gets everything going. I think the second act leaves a lot to be desired, and the third act, without spoiling too much, it takes one step too far. It takes exactly one step past where I think it should have been the hard cut, and by taking that extra step, it kind of spoils a lot of the rest of the movie, because it makes me think, oh, that's what we could have been doing the whole time. Instead, we were stuck in this other plot, and it would have been fine. That other plot is a perfectly fine plot, but adding in that extra last step just makes it an unfocused part of it. It makes it feel like they wanted to do something else and they instead got trapped in this other thing. So again, there's a lot to like, but by the time I hit the end of it, I kind of left with a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth just because it felt like there was something more interesting that could have been told than what we actually got.
Yeah, I didn't know going in, by the way, this was connected in any way to those other movies. It was just, I also just got the feeling. And then when that actor showed up, what Jensen, I think his name is. Let me Benson, Justin Benson. I was combining these names together. When he showed up, and I sort of looked up after the fact that this guy writing and directing this worked with them on a fair amount of their previous movies. I was like, okay, this suddenly clicks together. And their movies are a little hit and miss. I think Something in the Dirt's the one that I like the least by far. But they tend to be these very kind of like ambitious but low budget sci-fi or sometimes dipping into horror a little bit, but mostly sci-fi movies. And this very similar, like, has a sort of interesting mechanic that it wants to try and play with how its time loop, bubble, whatever you want to call it, is. In fact, the fact that I can't even, like, admittedly, I may be holding it back right now for spoilers, but I want to let the audience know that I'm not. I actually can't define it because the movie, honestly, doesn't do a good job of making it clear by the end exactly what the mechanics of it are. I don't want to talk about, like, what we think or whatever until we get to spoilers, because it is spoilery, but I as it was started to be introduced, I was like, okay, this is a little bit weirder, but okay, I'm interested. Yeah. Assuming that I was going to understand it better by the end, and I didn't. I never got a single lick of understanding by the end. So I kind of agree. I think it starts strong. I think the intrigue and the slow kind of like build to what's actually going on, where they're going, and then the setup all the way up to the end of the first act, where it sets up what the actual, like, this is the predicament you're in. This is what you're going to have to do. I like that first act quite a bit, barring maybe, like, I don't know, there was like 2 montages back to back, which felt like one montage too many.
No, fair.
And then in Act 2, there's like 4 more montages. And I'm like, the movie, I get it. They're waiting around for things. Just get on with it. Anyway, it loses me more as it went along, partly because some of the stuff that it teases feels like I've seen it in other better low-budget sci-fi movies that is playing with similar ideas. And then by the time it gets to the end, and it starts to throw a few other things at me, and it's almost kind of like we're suggesting a lot of things here, and I'm okay with things being somewhat ambiguous, but it feels like they're suggesting things that don't instantly make me start thinking about anything. It just kind of feels like, oh, we don't have to explain any of this, so we're just going to have some weird ideas that'll sort of like make it seem like we know what we're doing at the end. We'll make it seem like we've got some master plan, but I'm not convinced there is one. And if there is one, then I don't think they gave me enough to feel that confidence was earned. And you know, I was too frustrated by where it ended and how it kind of, looking back at the rest of the plot, like you say, I think it's more frustrating in hindsight, because it feels like it was barely touching on the concepts that it suddenly decides that it was doing at the end. You know, it's not like a twist where you go, oh, all of a sudden all of this has got a new context to it. It's more like, wait, you barely were hitting at any of this, and like I feel like you've barely scratched the surface of the things you were kind of hinting at, and there's lots of things they hint at that never really come back up or get any kind of fleshing out.
Yeah,
so
it feels like what during his worst periods, what Shyamalan was, where it was a twist not for the sake of recontextualizing like his earliest movies. It's a twist of, oh, isn't that crazy? Like, isn't it crazy that that's how things actually are? But it doesn't change anything about what the rest of the movie was throughout. No. And then, like you said, it's a problem of, because it isn't recontextualizing, it's just adding. It makes it feel like that last bit isn't touched upon at all in the earlier stuff. It's just, oh, okay, and now this part. For me, it felt like the writers had, or I guess singular writer at this point, the writer had an entire like Bible, an entire thing mapped out of, here's how this works in this world, and then they stripped out pages until it got down to the absolute bare bones of what was needed to tell this story, and just hint at the larger world going on. Like there was going to be sequels or spin-offs or other things set in this universe kind of stuff.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily think that. I think that's just going into franchise brain. There's absolutely nothing wrong with like having a very focused like pocket of a world, but you've actually thought about how the rest of it works and you hint at it. But that only works when the thing on its own and that you're focusing on is completely fulfilling on its own, and then you get to have fun with how the larger world works around it. But the fact that it's hindering in this case what the central thing is, because some of it just doesn't make that much sense and it just feels kind of random, borderline magic in some ways, where like, no, if we're doing time mechanics and we're doing stuff where like things are affecting things in the past, present, whatever, then I want to like sort of at least be able to somewhat puzzle it together. I want to get a sense of it so I can maybe even start to like predict things, not because I want to spoil the story for myself, but because that's part of the fun of like playing with this type of concept. And I don't think I ever felt like I could do that, because like I said, like half the movie is like them waiting around in montages for either because they're passing the time in the first act or because they're waiting for something to happen in the second act. And it almost feels like if they really want to go down the path that the ending sets them on, then they should have got to that ending at the end of Act 2. And Act 3 should have been the exploration of what is set up at the end of the story. But maybe, whatever the reasons might have been, they didn't want to do that. Maybe they sort of thought about it. Maybe he mapped it out and it was just, oh no, there's not enough budget for that. That would require all these other things, so we're not going to do that. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is. But all to be honest, I don't even necessarily think it was like something that was like a forced thing to me.
No.
It feels more like this is a writer-director who thinks the restraint he's showing is going to like make the story more mysterious, but I think he's misunderstood on some level, at least for my taste anyway. I mean, he may think he's made a great movie. He may be very proud of it. I don't want to like say that he's wrong for thinking that. But I don't think that it tantalizes my brain in my engagement in the way that I think that he thinks it's going to. And I wish it did, because I love a small, focused, cerebral sci-fi story which is really about the characters and what their past is and all that. And this movie kind of does that a little bit. And there's a couple of things that kind of feed into it and make me go, oh, this is really about this, or this is really about that. But it never really quite, I don't know, gets to the point where I'm super excited. And something that felt like it was the main plot getting into Act 3 is then something that's left dangling and never really touched upon again by the end of the movie, and that was also kind of frustrating. So yeah, as much as I liked a lot of the setup and liked some moments and visuals that happened later on, I have to say I came out of it feeling very just like, oh, you floundered all that. It feels like you spilled the breakfast on the floor and now the dog's licking it up.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying earlier on about it being a choice. It doesn't feel like it was forced upon, that of the decisions that were made here, but I do think it might almost be the editor's mindset. Like, obviously he was an editor on a lot of stuff, and a big thing of editing is don't let things go on too long. Like, don't let things sit. Don't tell more than you have to, or show more than you have to. And I think that the issue that approaches with this is that same sort of vibe of the central focal point of the story is this brother-sister pair. It's only once you introduce the larger stuff that it gets to be this completely separate other thing happening. But ultimately, you can't have that stuff and still be the central focal point, be the brother-sister, at least not with the way it currently is. So I think that it is an issue where they just kind of kept hacking away at that external stuff until it was literally just, here's all that's needed for the sake of what's being told for that central story, and everything else was just taken away in the editing process.
What's funny is I was told once when I was studying television production is that the path to director, sometimes the best people who are on other jobs that become directors, sometimes the best are editors, because they have such a good talent having edited lots of material, both good and bad, where oh, there's enough or there's too much of this and I didn't need all this, or like they tend to be very efficient because they've got a better idea of what's needed once they get into that edit suite. So they're very efficient at making things. But this maybe feels like, I don't know, because he's been editing these other guys' movies who are always very kind of abstract and doing these weird sci-fi ideas, that he's almost being too aggressive, perhaps, with like taking things away from the story. But the thing is, though, it's not just that he's taking stuff away. It's that there's like I said, there's stretches of this story where there's just montage after montage of time passing.
Yeah. It's also a pacing thing, structure.
So there's a lot of time there that they could have spent doing the other stuff that clearly was thought about, and could have really radically changed what the pace of the story was going to be. I'm all for a story set in one location, and this is pretty much one location. Obviously, you've got the surrounding areas, and it's more than one building, but it's basically just like a house and like a barn and whatever. But it's I'm cool with that. I'm cool with a bottle story, if you will. And I'm cool with bigger ideas, but being told in a low budget way, with a few characters, and it mostly being like stuff that we hear about is theoretical, but as long as the mechanics are fun and as long as it's telling a good story with the characters, none of that is a problem. If anything, I like it more that way sometimes, because it's like an impressive challenge of like how do you do 12 angry men, but it's about the world ending because of a alien invasion, but we're only in a room with a few characters and we only ever get that perspective. But you have to write it to convince the audience that there's an alien invasion outside and like the world's ending. Like that to me is a talent, it's a skill, and if you can convince me of that in that scenario, I love it. So I can love it super pared down. I just think the decisions made with this, as it went on, I was getting more and more frustrated with what it was doing. The last like 15 minutes, 20 minutes especially, really was like, okay, because up until that point I'm like, oh, it could still go a place that I like. I'm still hoping that it's going to stick the landing and give me a satisfying conclusion to this.
When it hit the last 15-20 minutes, I was hopeful for a second, because I was like, oh, okay, we just had that stretch there. It wasn't that big of a thing, but now we're throwing in this larger object. What disappointed me was I checked the time. Like, I checked that there was only 15-20 minutes left, and I was like, oh, you're not going to have time to do anything with this.
No. This is your ending. This is your tantalizing. Think of all this bigger stuff as an exciting ending, but that's it. We're actually going to do anything with it.
Yeah, but even then, I would have been fine with that. I would have been fine if they had tantalized that stuff and said, and the story continues, and like we don't get to see where it goes. But without spoiling too much, there's one more scene. There's one more final scene, and that's where I think they skipped over all of the stuff that would have been interesting just to show, and here's what happens by the end. And it's just so frustrating to me, because that would have been the most interesting part.
Yeah. I think also a stronger connection to the characters would have been good. Like, as much as it's this brother-sister thing, I think the heart of the movie and the implication of what's actually going on suggests that I really should have cared about something else as well, and I don't think it ever quite achieved that. So that's a problem.
I think the core of this was supposed to be the emotional bond between these two, and I just it danced on it every once in a while, but by the time we hit Act 2, I was like, all right, well, they're just strangers now. I don't care.
Yeah, and as much as I kind of agree with the one more scene thing, it kind of already lost me at that point with what it did right before then, just because I could almost feel that you're being mysterious to make this all feel like it's got a mystique and a like something we can't comprehend because it's so fancy and technologically advanced or whatever. But it just kind of came across as, this is smoke and mirrors. There's nothing here that's actually tangible. It's just, hey, we don't have to answer anything. We can just have some like vague dialogue and gobbledygook to sort of tide you over, and that's all it is. That's how I felt anyway in this particular case.
No, I agree. I think it is. I was just more hopeful. Like, I wanted to like this part. I wanted to like the way that it was building up this larger idea, but then they just immediately hacked it at the knees, and they were like, all right, but that's as big as you're going to get. Like, it didn't allow me to imagine where the story could go. It just immediately showed me as it ended.
Yeah. All right. Well, spoilers then, I guess. So we can actually talk about it.
Yeah, in terms of the acting, I don't think there's a bad actor really in the bunch. I think none of them are giving fantastic performances, but none of them are dragging the movie down.
I mean, it's a two-person show for the most part, the brother and sister. Riley Dandy, who plays Sydney, the sister, I saw her in a horror movie a couple of years ago called Christmas Bloody Christmas, about a robot Santa that goes about killing people.
All right.
It's a decent movie for what it is. I quite enjoyed it. And a big part of that movie, actually, and why it was kind of enjoyable, was she was very natural and likable along with the other co-star, and their chemistry was pretty good. But it was a lot more lighthearted. Well, more lighthearted than this, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So I think she's pretty good. And the actor here who plays the brother, Adam David Thompson, I recognized him. I'm like, what do I know him from? I've probably seen him pop up in a couple of things, but the main thing that I think I'm remembering his face from is a Netflix miniseries called Godless, which was pretty good. I couldn't tell you which character he played now. It's been like a good 7 years or something like that since that came out, but he was in there. He's listed for all 7 episodes, so I'll just have to trust him.
Yeah, I don't think I really recognized either of them. He showed up in one episode of Manifest, which I watched, and I thought that was meh. Everything else for her, I don't recognize her at all, so fair enough.
Yeah, so there's that. I mentioned the director who in this, I'll double check, but yeah, it's all short films before this. This is his first feature length movie, which makes sense. You know, it's pretty normal to go from that to that. But like I said, big editing career before now. Edited Something in the Dark, edited this movie, edited Synchronic, edited. I'm sure there was some other. It definitely did The Endless. I definitely saw that in here.
Yes.
So a lot of different stuff there from him.
VHS Viral? I don't know if you watched that one.
I haven't seen that one specifically. It's an anthology movie, so I wonder if he edited the whole thing or just one segment.
It's a segment Bone Store.
Okay, well, one segment then. I assume that's one of his editing credits.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. What's the betting that those two other guys directed that segment?
Well, it says director's Justin Benson, so
Yes,
I'm assuming he followed him around.
Yeah. I there must be best friends. This is...
Yep.
They're a trio. But he's always left off to the side in the editing.
I was going to say, 2 of them get the top billing. It's Benson and Moorhead and Felker.
Well, that's all going to change, because now he's here doing his own movies.
It was just a big, bold impact font on the thumbnail will give him recognition. A film by Michael Felker.
Depending on the opinion we're about to give, though, which we've already given now, that might be a compliment or like, we're holding you accountable for this.
Yep.
So
a film by Michael Felker or Alan Smithy, depending on whether or not he likes us to review.
I mean, it's not Alex. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's a. That's the thing. Like, as much as we're being very critical, because I think we both saw the potential in the premise and felt very underwhelmed by the ending and a little annoyed by what it failed to do. But it's not. Right. You know, there's things in it I like. There's concepts I like, and I think the first like 20-30 minutes is mostly pretty good. It's just it just does not live up to it and kind of falters and doesn't do enough with its premise. So.
Yeah.
Oh well. Spoilers then for Things Will Be Different. You have been warned from this point forth. Where do I want to start with this? Because it's like, do I just yell out, why was the daughter mute? Do I yell out?
All right. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay, we'll start at the beginning.
And as we approach each thing, we'll get there. So it opens up with a phone call, brother to sister, and it's worked out this whole plan. We get the back end of it of there was some sort of robbery or theft or something like that. The brothers roped in the sister to help out, and they are on their way to a safe house location where they're going to wait out the cops, and there is something special about this safe house, which obviously we already said.
I love that you emphasized the phone call, which I would have completely ignored, but glossed over their actual first interaction in the diner, where it kind of sets up the relationship by him not really being around and knowing that his sister's daughter's 6 instead of 10. His attitude towards it when he's like, she didn't make that bracelet. Our teacher made that bracelet. There's no way she made that bracelet. So you get a little bit of their repertoire as they're going, and part of the things that he's selling her on this like help me hide out sis trip is that, hey, we've missed a lot of brother sister bonding time, so we can do that for a couple of weeks while we wait out for things to cool down, things to calm down. But I think what got me is that once they're in the woods and they're on their way to this area, is that he like kind of like implies a couple of things. He sort of like, I think he pulls out the journal. There's a quick little flash to him getting the journal, although I don't think we see the woman's face till later, but
it's much later.
He's basically saying, yeah, this woman gave me this journal, and he's clearly already explained what the gimmick is to her. We don't get to hear it here as the audience, but he's clearly talking to his sister in a way where he's already said, yeah, there's like a time portal in the closet, and you have to like
going to Narnia.
Yeah, so they go there. They have to like scare away some guys who are like shooting birds like outside the house, which I thought came back into it later.
Yeah, so going into this, obviously the IMDb synopsis says something about time portal and time stuff. I thought we were going to do a time loop aspect, and this was going to be like our thing that signals of like we're at the beginning of the loop each time as these drunken guys shooting birds outside the cabin.
Yeah, but they scare them away. They get in the house. They hear sirens. Like, oh shit, we have to get going with this. And I don't mind that they don't explain this next part. We just accept that, oh no, the book that he was given has instructions for how to like activate the time portal, which is that there's a couple of grandfather clocks in the house, and you have to go up and like turn the the hands.
It's like a combination lock. Like,
yeah,
you got to spin it certain directions, certain number of times.
Yeah, and that's in 2 different clocks, and then that unlocks the door, or whatever, and you go in, and they're in darkness, and they have to say something in Latin.
Yeah, I was going to look this up beforehand, but I forgot. There's a Latin phrase that they have to. There's a phone inside the closet. They have to pick up the phone, dial a number, and then say a Latin phrase and hang up.
What's so wild is that until we started talking about this scene, I'd forgotten the whole phone and we have to say a phrase thing. And looking back at this scene now, given the rest of it, I'm like, this just feels like weird for weird's sake, because
it's a magic spell. That's what it is. It's just whatever steps you need to take, it's casting a magic spell.
Very strange. But they come out the closet, there's no sirens anymore, and it's a different season outside. It looks cold all of a sudden, right? No leaves on the trees, anything like that. And you're like, okay, they've moved through time in some capacity, seemingly. Honestly, at first I thought they were in like the post-apocalypse because it was so depressing outside. I thought, oh god, is this after the nuclear winter? What's happened here? But no, it's just a different time period. In fact, the implication from the technology that's sitting around is that we're some time in the past. I mean, it's actually further in the past than I thought, because I saw a CD player and a stack of CDs and thought, oh, it's like 1995 or something. Like,
yeah,
was what I thought. It turns out to be in the mid-50s. Well, kinda. The time anomaly that this place resides in seems to have started in 1955, and that's just kind of eternally in like a bubble or something now.
Maybe not.
I mean,
so,
yeah, we'll get to that when we talk about the rest of the time stuff. But...
yeah, but the way that they explain it at this point is that they just went back in time, and that this is something that has been used by this person that he's gotten the book from, and it is just a 1-to-1 time machine. So they wait back in the past for 2 weeks, and in present time, aka their current time, 2 weeks also passes. And they say that's long enough that all the cops will disappear, nobody will be following us, so we can go back home.
Yeah, it's basically just like a tunnel from dark. Time's moving forward on either side of the tunnel, but it's just like this bridge between 2 time periods, and then we go back through whatever. Obviously, I'm thinking here, because they're like, oh, so we just have to wait out 2 weeks, and they're like, yeah, hug, this montage of them just drinking booze and like farting around for 13 days.
Airbnb, that's literally all it is. By the way, I looked up that Latin. It translates to, I pray for a safe journey.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
So obviously I'm thinking, okay, I've got a feeling that you don't just walk back through the door and go back to your time period. Something fishy is going to happen by the end.
20 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and agree with you on that one.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have... It was basically once the montage was playing, it was skipping through time so fast, because my initial assumption might have been, no, they can go back in 2 weeks, but a lot of stuff's going to happen in those 2 weeks that's quite tense, or other stuff's going to happen. But because they like just montage through almost the entire 2 week period, I'm like, oh, no. They're going to try and go back, something's going to go wrong, or something's going to get in the way, and they're stuck here, whatever.
Yeah.
Actually, my expectation, if I was being completely honest, is that they were going to go through the door, and then they wouldn't go back to the right time, and it would basically be a movie about them trying to get back to the right time somehow.
Well, my thought was that on the very last night when they're there, they're sitting there having a conversation, and the conversation goes to their mother and father, and how neither of them can really remember that much about them. They have faint memories or whatnot. And the Sydney, the sister, talks about the mother and says like, oh, I can't, she always played like this disco track and I can never remember the name of the track, but it's just in my head. And then she says the line, bring me back to her, clearly referring to her daughter, who she has left in the present time thing, and says like, I can't be away for that long. 2 weeks is the maximum. I thought that they were like, this guy had more information in the notebook, could direct the flow of time even like further back and get them to like actually meet up with their parents.
That's what you thought it was
I thought this was going to be the thing where like, but then that causes its own barrel of monkeys in messing with everything there.
Yeah, I also thought they were going to do something, because there's a line here where she says, you remember our deal, I remember mom, you remember dad, and between us, we kind of remember like a normal family. Yeah. And I thought, wait, are they going to do something here where they've already had time shenanigans and they don't realize it, but the reason why one of them remembers a dad and one remembers a mom is because they've actually come from different timelines or something like that. I thought, they're doing something like that. They both have Venn diagram tattoos on their wrists. Weird brother-sister bonding tattoo, I guess.
That's another thing that is said during this conversation on the last night, is that the reason that the brother feels like they need to rekindle their sibling closeness or whatever is because something happened in their past where she took the fall for their crimes or whatever, and she went to jail for a while, and he just let her do so. And he feels like he feels like he owes her for that time that went missing.
Yeah, and she's in debt and stuff now, and that's partly why I did it. I'll be honest, I think I'm unclear, and I don't think the movie ever cleared it up for me, whether or not she was actually part of this bank robbery he just did, or if he just called her for help after the fact, because it felt like he was just calling her in after he'd already done it. But at the same time, it kind of felt like the way like she shows up with a gun and like,
the initial phone call at the very beginning, she says something of like, hey, I got to tell you, I don't have any of the money. And he's like, don't worry about it. I picked up both bags.
Okay, so
she was there.
Okay, that's fair enough. I just missed that line then. But so fair enough. Okay, so it's like, okay, some character building. I was expecting to find out more about this incident where she got arrested and he didn't. I thought there was going to be more to that, and that never really comes up again, other than just alluding to again the fact that she went to prison and he didn't. But yeah, obviously it's the night before, they're going back the next day, they're packing, whatever, and he's snooping around. But this is where something weird happens, where all of a sudden on the door of the closet there is like a board over it saying "Go to the mill." And also, he sees some weird stuff in the mill, the barn.
During the montage, they specifically show that these mill doors were locked over and over again. Nobody could get in. And then on the last day, as he's going out to burn some trash, he sees they're both wide open. So he starts freaking out. So
stuff has changed, and this is shown throughout time and time again. But a good example of it this is after some stuff's been explained. But she goes to the cupboard and there's nothing there, and then she waits a second and opens it again, and it's filled with booze. So things can just change, right?
This is where it gets a little bit like Tenet for me, where like they talk about how there's people waiting at the end of this time thing and at the beginning of this time thing, and they call it the Vice, and we'll get to that in a minute, but like it gets a little bit confusing as to how the hell does this actually work.
No, we're there basically, because they go to the mill, there's like an etching on the podium, on the lectern, whatever you want to call it, and it's basically say, hey, to initiate, to this, whatever we're doing here, scratch in an X here, and they don't want to at first. She's like, no, F this, we want to go home, blah, 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 blah.
This isn't a church, this is a satanic ritual, and I will not be a part of it.
But, of course, when they can't go home, and she's freaking out, she wants to see her daughter, ultimately, it's like, well, we kind of have to. We have to go and do this. So he scratches it in. A safe appears in the room behind them. He opens the safe, and there's a tape recorder that's chained to inside the safe, and it just says, there's like a message saying, say something into the tape and put it back in to start the cycle. And I'm like, okay, whatever this movie's doing, it's about to really sort of establish what it is. Because this feels like that moment in the movie. And he says hello,
rules.
He puts it back in the safe, and then he opens it up, takes the tape out, and hits play, and there's like a voice, clearly using like a voice like disguiser kind of, modulator, and is like, I can't remember what the first thing he says is, but like, basically they start a back and forth where, he records
like,
something in the tape.
Why are you here? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And they just try to figure out stuff from each other.
Yeah, he just records something on the tape, then hits play, and you hear the voice from the future, presumably, or the future sent back to the past, and then to here. Yeah, whatever.
Sure.
And of course, the sister Sydney, she's not really amused by any of this, and she like grabs the tape at one point and demands something. It stops working. They put it back in the safe, then it starts working, and the voice is like, "Hey, the cycle is it's fragile.
It's fragile. You can't mess with it like that. One person at a time, please.
You gotta be careful." So I'm like, okay, I'm trying to think how this works. But yes, so they talk about the vice, the time vice, where there's something on the left, something on the right, meaning in the future and in the past, right? There's something in the past, future, and they've created some kind of time loop or communication bubble or something.
Yes.
And because of that, they can affect things in here. And the part that made sense to me is that anything they do in here, let's say they kill a person, that body will still be there. So in the future, they know, hey, why is the body not here? The body should be lying here because you killed them. We're in the future. It should still be here. Right? That part makes sense to me. I actually don't think I ever got a sense of what was important about them having a group also in the past, because it never really comes up other than just talking about this time vice stuff.
Yeah, so what I think it is, and forgive me, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this. So almost immediately, either after or during that part where they're hesitating about signing this thing, Sydney tries to run out of the house. She just tries to bail. She runs away.
Yeah.
And as she does so, she gets a certain distance and then just starts coughing up copious amounts of blood. And Joseph, the brother, goes to save her, brings her back, and they realize, I think it's also said on the tape at some point,
there's a perimeter, there's a bubble you can't go beyond or you'll die kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's not like specific to the fact of we've set this up. It's something about how displaced objects can't go that far away from their source or whatever it is, because they say time is not kind to displaced objects. So with all that said, what I think is happening is they say they need something into this tape. The tape makes it to the end of the timeline, to the right side of the vice. The right side then is able to communicate to the left side, whatever is said, and then the left side can prep whatever it is so that it appears for them seemingly instantaneously.
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is it would have to always be there from when they set it up for them. So why is it appearing? That's the time bubble part that's weird to me. Is that?
Well, that's the thing, is the safe just like, boom, shows up right in the room. Like, I have to assume that it's a thing of like a rolling timeline where it's like, okay, you're able to make changes, but then as you change it, it instantly affects you, sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could just say it's from their perspective, it instantly appears because, but they've already eaten so much stuff from the kitchen, presumably, that technically, the more stuff they keep prepping for them, wouldn't there be like mountains of stuff that wouldn't fit in the cupboards to cover all the stuff to put in there?
But that's only in the new timeline that's created. It's pretty much a new timeline that they just keep on hopping along each time.
Every time, okay. I'll accept that as like the weird time anomaly that this farmhouse operates in allows for this to happen, and that's all you can really do.
But then the alternative to all this is that may be how it works. But the thing is that the vice says to them, hey, we don't want your money. We don't care about that. We want to clean up. We want to wipe this all from existence, more or less. And they're like, okay, but you could have just done that without us signing our names. So what's up? Why are we involved?
Yeah, because their initial concern is they're scared that they're trapped here, and they're assuming that whoever's done this knows they've stolen money and that they want it. And they're very paranoid instantly. But the voice in the tape makes it clear, no, we don't care about any of that, but you're not supposed to be here. You're unwanted guests in our experiment, I guess? I'll call it that.
The machine, whatever it is, yeah.
So you're unwanted, and you have to be wiped. It'll be quick and painless, but you have to go. And that's when the brother sort of like thicks quick on his feet and goes, well, you could have just killed us regardless, meaning there's probably something that we could do for you that you can't do from your either end of the timeline thing that you're on. What is it? What do you need? Mm-hmm. And then this sets up kind of this is what the movie's going to really be about, is that the voice says, there's going to be another unwanted visitor. We don't know exactly when, but they're going to show up at some point. We want you to kill them. And if you kill them, we will make sure you and your sister go back to, your appropriate time. Right? Yes. Now, can you trust that we will follow through in that? There's no way to know for sure, but they're saying they're going to.
And you literally have no other options.
Yeah, you're kind of stuck at regardless. So they're not very happy about this, but the brother says yes, okay. Sister's kind of pissed that you just agreed to it that quickly, but then it's like, well, what else were you going to do? So, the montage, here's some extra guns in the safe. Like, here's, get some stuff, hide some guns around. Okay, what are we going to do? I'll take this watch, you take that watch. We'll just wait until some person shows up. And then seemingly over 2 or 3 montages, a year passes pretty much.
Yeah, they show that the sister is like in a routine, all that. The brother seems to be a lot more broken down in a lot of ways. He also has started just talking to the tape recorder and like having conversations with the tape recorder more frequently than the sister does. Sister's super pissed off over the fact that her daughter is just gone. Like, she's been away for a year now, and she's been away from her daughter that long. So there's kind of this hostility growing between them, and then it pops up and says like day 356 or something like that.
Yeah, before we get to that though, there is like one part in the middle where it kind of establishes that Sydney has been trying to kind of figure out what the hell is going on. What is this place? And she like gets the brother and sits him down and says, okay, I've got a new theory based on all the things that I found in the house, old like boxes full of records and family photos and whatever else. And this is where we find out, okay, there's nothing in this house other than the fact that there's like a TV and like a VCR to watch stuff on. Other than 1 or 2 things that seem to have been placed here by whoever's doing this experiment, everything in here seems to have been working normally. All the photographs and the family members who died seems to go up to about 1955, and then that's it. Whatever happened here that created this time anomaly happened about then, and we've been here ever since. Which would make me think that maybe this, like the left of the device is probably in 1955. That would be my guess.
Yeah, something like that. Or maybe that's like, if we view this as a time bubble, something that is more removed from standard like time, maybe this is where the bubble was taken out. It was 1955. And then the left is just, at the left side of that bubble, whatever you want to call being outside of time, but to the left of it.
See, I don't think so necessarily, because to me, the implication would be that the left and the right are in the real timeline. And it's only the experiment itself, the bubble, the anomaly, whatever you want to call it. It's only that's existing outside of regular time.
My only question comes down to how long has this wormhole, whatever you want to call it, existed? Because say we're in 2024 and this is looping back to 1955 or whatever date it happens to be back then it would have to keep on shifting along the timeline in that way. So if this house were actually made in like 2014, if the link was made in 2014, then wouldn't it have to be 1945 by that reason? Like, nothing in this house has changed, which makes me think it's stuck in the 1955 era.
Yeah, the house is, I think. The house is in a bubble. I don't think the house is moving forward. I think the idea that time's moving forward here that's matching present day is false information they had to start with.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think you can put any credence into what they knew from the book. Especially since, obviously we find out more about the woman who gave him that book. Which is funny because I was thinking, oh, this was a woman that he was flirting with or maybe even dating who gave him this information. I thought that's what the implication was near the start, and then obviously we find out who that woman was later, and I'm like, oh, I hope not.
Yeah, I took her to just be a mysterious woman. I thought she was like related to this group, and once it said that there is this, oh, that's another thing we completely glossed over. During the initial bit, right before they have to sign their names on the pulpit, there's a charred body, a corpse, just sitting in front of it. and he recognizes it as the woman because there was a heirloom watch that this woman always wore, and it is also on the corpse.
Although I think it's open to debate if it's actually her or if she just put that watch on a corpse.
Just staged, yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think there's open to interpretation on that. But yeah, so yeah, we'll get to that, right? But so they've established this, right? And some of the mechanics of like what this place is, the whole Vice thing was kind of weird to me. Even though we've talked it through, I still don't feel quite satisfied by what it is or how it works, even with us explaining it like here and like talking it through.
Yeah.
But I will say that what I did think worked here was the simple premise of mysterious people say you can get out of this if you kill this visitor. And I thought that this visitor, if and when they show up, will lead to more answers about what this place is, because presumably this visitor is a danger to the experiment or a danger to the people running it, and that's why they want them dead. Yeah. Now, the weird thing about this is that we never really get an answer as to why they're so determined to want this person dead. Really, by the end, maybe we could sit and think about it and come up with some answers. But
yeah, I feel like it's supposed to be left up to like this eldritch sort of thing of like, here's something beyond your comprehension. You aren't meant to understand our motives. Just know this is what we need done.
Yeah, but it's not a cosmic horror movie. It's
not a horror, but it is like the idea that there is this entity, this group that is able to control the passage of time like this. It's kind of that cosmic sort of feel to it. It's this idea of like, if you told me this was the Men in Black, I'd believe you.
Yeah, everything you're saying is not satisfying to me though. Like
that's fine. Yeah.
It can still be more and be more satisfying and make more sense, even with keeping this group who's running the experiment like mysterious and secretive. Like you could still do that. The problem is though is that I don't even have context for a lot of like any of the parts. Like all of the parts feel underdefined to me.
And again, that's that kind of thing I was talking about before, where it felt to me like the writer had the full Bible. They know exactly how this universe works. They know everything about everything going on, and they just decided to not put it in this movie because they were like, it's not needed.
Yeah, possibly. So, I mean, yeah, they wait. There's montages. They whatever. It also implies that she's been trying to figure this out a bunch of times because the brother Joseph starts like going, "Oh, this theory, yeah, that's great, but what about the theory that it's us from a different timeline or that it's our parents from a different timeline?" I like that one. That one was really cooking me gas.
Which he's coming off as so angry about it, and obviously they have right to be. They've been stuck here for a year waiting for somebody who might eventually show up. But I love this sequence just for the point of it showing, like, here's the breaking point. Here's the moment where it's been too long. And the sister makes the accusation that all of this is just, like, the brother is trying to con her out of her share of the money. And he's like, that's the dumbest thing you've said yet, because I've been stuck here too.
Yeah, the funny thing about this is that, okay, I'm getting like the character drama of this movie is that he feels responsible that he dragged her into something when they were younger. She went to prison. He's dragged her into this bank heist, and now she's stuck here, possibly to never get back to her daughter. So the title to me, obviously he actually says it at the end of the movie in a different context, but the title to me was already making sense because it's this idea of this guy who keeps thinking, oh, I'm going to fix it. Things will be different this time. I'm going to do one thing that will solve everything. And it doesn't solve it. It's once again, he's ruined their life with another
just falling into the same patterns over and over.
And I'm like, okay, I get what you're doing here. That's fine. Anyway, so jumping ahead a little bit, they've been waiting, right? And, you know, and this is the frustrating part of this, is that some of the actual cinematography and the way it paced out, like when the visitor arrives and like, oh, they're obscured by this one tree that's in front of Sydney, so she can't see this you know, sniper setting up shot. And like taking a, it's only just because the brother comes out at the last second and sees it that they kind of. But that's the thing, is that as this goes on and we get a sense of who this person is a bit later, it's like, well, I don't think they were ever actually trying to kill them then, presumably. And if they were, then that leads to a whole lot more questions in many ways. But then again, they do take shots, and I mean, some of them are legs and like don't actually get direct hits, but some of them are okay.
There's one that manages to incapacitate Joseph. He gets snuck up on, he gets taken out, and then the following sequence is almost where we get some more answers, which is out in the mist. There's a fog that's built up around this house right now. We see that Sydney is loading up her gun, looking for the, what do we want to call this? The figure, the visitor.
That's what they keep calling her.
That's fine. So the visitor is doing the say anything, holding a boombox above their head, and it's playing this disco track, which turns out to be the exact same one that Sydney remembers her mom playing back from her childhood. And so they start shooting at each other. Sydney gets clipped in the arm, and the visitor takes Joseph out to the mill, down to the place where the original safe and tape recorder are. And this is the part where Sydney then gets on the different tape recorder. Well, first she tries to break out. First she tries to just pry the boards that are stopping the time travel closet and just tries ripping them off one by one. And they keep on throwing up new boards via whatever time travel stuff they got going on.
And eventually a safe appears in that bedroom where the closet is with a tape recorder so they can communicate with her. And what's actually just a weird thing here, aside from what's about to go on in the plot, is that the voice in the tape starts off with the modulator as it's had, but it kind of shifts at a certain point to just the real voice of the character talking to her. And
it's once she completely breaks down and says, like, I'm done, I'm out of this, and I have every reason to believe that visitor is my mother, and I am not about to be about that.
Yeah, well, I'm not even talking about that. All I want to say is that this character actually, once the voice stops being modulated, sounds more like the villain from Scream, and he kept calling the character Sydney, which was very distracting because that's the character from Scream. So he's like, Sydney, you have to listen to me. And I'm like, this is weird. Why did you name her Sydney? This is so distracted.
Yeah, that's fair. I wasn't even thinking that, but I can see it now.
Yeah, as soon as he said the name Sydney and like that sort of fairly gravelly voice that he has, I'm like, okay, that actually sounds more like Scream now. Anyway, so, you know, basically he's making a deal where he's like saying, look, like, we know it's not your mother. We can't tell you why we know that, but we know it's not your mother. And she doesn't really want to play ball, but he's like, okay, look, if you explain to us everything you've seen with this visitor, tell us what you've seen so far, any like signifying qualities, anything you can tell us to help us try and define who it is, we'll tell you why we know for sure it's not your mother. And just as he's about to say it and sort of actually kind of give her some information,
it's literally, we know it's not your mother because, and then it cuts out.
Yeah. The tape stops working, and the reason why it stops working is because in the barn, the visitor has pulled the tape recorder out and is making Joseph speak into it for her, because we find out, and it's pretty clear it's a woman by this point, just from the physicality, but we find out at this point that the visitor, just writing on a notepad, says, I need you to speak for me, and he says hello, and sort of gets him to say a bunch of other things, which is basically lie and say that, oh, we've killed her, you know, we can't get to the body.
Weather
right
has stopped us to getting the body. I'll do it tomorrow, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. It's not really important, right? But the details here is that the visitor, whoever they are, can't talk. There's an interesting detail where the visitor switches the scope on the sniper rifle, and I don't know why.
Okay, so 2 things on that. First off, I guess 3 things. First off is one of the other things that is left in the note is that the visitor is here to come after the people.
I was getting to that, but like,
all right,
the sniper rifle thing, they focus on this. She takes several minutes unscrewing the previous like scope on the rifle and puts a new one on.
Yes.
This was treated like it was an important detail, and I have no idea why.
I'm not sure. I'm not positive on the sniper rifle. I think that might be one of those things that, like, again, there might, if there were this larger idea of like going through this, I mean, again, spoilers for the very end of the movie, but we are implied that we come back to these moments over and over again. I think that might be something that would have been played on in this larger Bible that was not actually ever done. The part about the muteness, though, that's the part that I want to bring up. I don't think she's mute. I think that she is choosing not to say anything, because if she so much as says, like, the tape recorder, she's having Joseph talk for her, specifically because if she uses her actual voice, that can be used against her. Because remember, they're looking for any details at all, including gender. They have no idea whether or not it's male or female.
Yeah, and she's, you know, the visitor's got like a balaclava on, a hood, like making very, you know, a lot of effort to conceal every detail about who they are.
And later on, when she's attacked, you do hear her like yelp out in pain. It's not like it's absolute muteness. So I do think that it is a choice that is being made by the character.
Okay. I mean, I don't hate that. I think that's interesting and suggests a few things where they at least know the sort of villain they're playing with. Or, and I say villain, if they are indeed villains, but the idea that whoever's running the experiment, like that's her enemy, and she has to try and get around them by not letting them know what she's doing. So, okay, fine. And like you say, the other thing she reveals is that she's here to find the man that killed her family. That is like what she writes down on the notepad.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, you're opening something up here. Is it going to turn out to be Joseph was the man that killed your family? Are you sort of saying that in a way where you're sort of like foreshadowing to him something that he's going to do? And then in a way he kind of does. But yeah, so you know, there's a lot of like typical tension stuff here. He's trying to like, you know, cut through the rope that his hands are tied with. He's trying to get to the gun that he's hidden in the pew. Meanwhile, you know, the sister, like she's on the tape recorder again. He's like, hey, your brother's alive in the barn, and we don't think he's alone. So she like gets her gun and she goes. So we have a bit of a standoff kind of moment. It's a whole thing, and they end up back in the house. And this is where, when the brother finally because he's like struggling to walk because he gets shot in the leg, so he's really,
his leg's broken. He's messed up.
Yeah, he's having a tough time of it. When he gets back, they have a whole standoff thing. The sister's fighting with the visitor, but they play this moment where the balaclava gets like sort of like lifted up a little bit, and you can see a little bit of the chin, the jaw, whatever. And she sort of goes to try and lift up the mask, but the visitor pulls it back down, hits her away. It's like, no, let me see your face. Who are you? And eventually, she does get her pinned down. She lifts up the balaclava, and it's the woman who gave Joseph the journal and all the information about this house in the first place. Because we saw one quick flashback of what her face looked like earlier, and we're like, okay, it's her. But Sydney then goes, Steph, my daughter, as an adult? Yes. And we're like, wait, what? Okay.
So we've immediately got like 6 layers of time loop going on here.
Well, it's not even like time loop, really. Yeah, like you're jumping to time loop. This could just be as simple as her daughter has come back from the future and is trying to undo whatever these two characters got into. Right. That said, though, she has been taking shots at them, and like I mean, admittedly, you could say, oh, she shot him in the leg intentionally to not hurt him. You know, she only grazed her mother because she didn't want to kill her. Obviously, like I agree. I think all those are choices. However, she's also the one who gave them the notebook in the first place. That is also true. Yes.
So she's committing them down this path for some reason in order to make all this other stuff happen.
I don't have a satisfying answer to that.
Right. The movie doesn't give you any. Trust me, the movie knows, the writer knows exactly how all this happened, but it does not come across in this movie. We don't know how did she manage to get out of this time loop before any of this happened to then pass along the book long enough to be a regular at the bar.
Oh, no. There's two things here. I mean, this could be before she's a regular at the bar, though. This could be before that.
Possible.
Here's my thing. There's two elements to this that are kind of button heads a little bit. One element is her mother and uncle end up in this barn, time loop shenanigans, never come out of it, and they're missing for the rest of her life. She is researched over time. She's investigated. She's become obsessed with finding out what happened to them. And she has found a way to invade it, to interfere with it, mess with time, maybe go back in time, whatever. But then, like you say, there's also the element of she put them in there, which suggests that she wants to get all this stuff going because she thinks the only way she can achieve what she wants to do is to put her mother and her uncle into this predicament in the first place. That part I can't really like get, because we have so little information. Like, if the man who quote unquote killed her family isn't Joseph, because Joseph tries to take a shot at her, and Sydney, now knowing that this is her daughter, jumps in and says no and gets shot and dies, right? So he's literally killed his sister, which could be what Steph meant by, I'm here to find the man that killed my family. Not that she seems to be here for just simply revenge on him necessarily, but whatever. So there's a lot of elements here where, like, and this is the weird thing. I brought up Dark earlier, and I'm actually thinking about that. Where Dark, I don't want to spoil Dark. It's a great show, right? It's a German show, Netflix original, about time travel shenanigans, namely a tunnel from roughly present day that went back to the 80s, and then there was sort of some more elements to it added in over time, but there was a whole like time loop quality to it. And by the end of the third and final season, it became clear why this was created and what the original person was trying to do by doing so. And it made sense, and it all kind of came together. But that was 3 seasons of like heavy confusion to get to that point. And I feel like this is setting up some interesting questions, and then it just never like actually tries to add anything to them later. I feel like everything here with the daughter being the one who's here try to go through the door, I can only assume, I mean, you said how did she get out of the loop? Well, I assume that her going through this door is her getting out of the loop. She makes it to the door and leaves.
Exactly, but like, here's the thing. In order to get to the point where she's currently at right now in the loop, it feels like she must have already have been through the loop, or at least she has some idea as to what's going on.
Well, yeah, on some capacity, she has somehow went back in time, and this is her presumably leaving the loop and going back to regular time, right? We don't know how she got here in the first place. We just know that she did because she's here already.
Right.
We know that someone destroys the door after she leaves because the brother finds the door all smashed up when he goes to get it. Maybe she's achieved what she was trying to do. That would be weird because I don't know what she achieved here if she did. Maybe it's a case of maybe she's just looping. Maybe she's trying over and over again, trying to like fix things the same way that we find out the brother ends up doing by the end.
Based off what you were saying earlier of the thing of I'm here to kill the people who killed my family, I feel like it's not so much Joseph, it's more so the entity, the men in black behind the
device. Experiment. Yeah. By the end, I think that makes more sense. But in the moment when she said that, I thought, because my first instinct, and I've not even mentioned this yet, is when this character showed up and I could see it was a woman, I said, it's Sydney. It's another of Sydney. Yeah. I thought it's an alternate Sydney. It's Sydney from the future. It's Sydney from an alternate timeline. I don't know which specifically.
It's a Sydney that's been stuck in this bubble for so long because that whole thing of, you're trapped, I abandoned you. Somehow Joseph gets out, leaves Sydney behind, and Sydney loops back around. Yeah,
it's a Sydney who, or it isn't, but I thought it was going to be a Sydney who has been here long enough that she's learned a lot more, that she's thought of ways how to try and fight whoever's doing this experiment, whoever's manipulating this time loop, and is trying. And time loop's not even the right phrase, because it's not a time loop, right? I mean, it kind of becomes one at the end, but they're not in a time loop in the movie. They're just in like a weird bubble that's kind of being affected by the past and the present.
I think bubble is the best way to say it. You were talking at the very beginning about a bottle episode, about this idea of like cast removed for everything else. This is just that, but on the timeline. It feels like it's nobody can enter, nobody can leave. They even make the point of saying like there's no planes, there's no roads. It is entirely separated from everything.
Yes. So and there is definitely some Easter eggs that I'm sure people have, like, there's probably some like lists of things, but there was definitely some photographs in the house changing occasionally based on stuff, and like obviously the past was being manipulated in some way. Maybe whatever information was being sent back from the right in the future was going back to the left in the past, and it was altering some things, some events.
Yeah, somehow, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
We didn't even say that at the end of the fight, Joseph does finally make his way to the house, and he's got a gun locked on Steph, the visitor, and Sydney jumps in the way of the bullet.
I mean, I did say that, but go on.
Did you? All right. Yeah. She ends up bleeding out. She dies, and that's what gives Steph enough time to get up. And that's the other thing, is that they mention at the beginning, the door is locked. We need the key. There is no key. She pulls out the key. The visitor has the key. So that's just been with her the entire time.
She clearly has more information. She clearly has a plan. But beyond this, once she's left the movie, we never get another hint as to what her plan is or why she's doing. I mean, we get, obviously she said, I'm finding the man who killed my family.
But we don't get more. We don't get the extension off of, and now I've completed my task.
It felt like it was begging for like more exploration. Like, at the very least, like a scene where like she either confirms or denies that she succeeded. Like, did she complete whatever she was trying to do? Is she done?
Yeah, and based off, all right, so what happens immediately next says no. It says that she didn't complete it, at least not in the final sense, because the tape recorder people, they talk to Joseph again. Joseph's all upset that his sister's dead, has to bury his sister, and then goes out to the mill. And then underneath the mill, or teleported around the mill somehow, is the empty black room with a single light, and there are two people, one on the left, one on the right, and it's a male and female, and they are the Vice. They are the ones in charge of all of this.
Yes. But they seem to be existing in the same place, which is straight. And honestly, this is the stuff, much like when they went into the closet, it was just this black void with like a phone call, or with a telephone. And then this here, where he walks into this room, it's just a black void, but then there's like a light at the end where these two people are sitting at a computer device of some kind.
It's like a 50s computer.
Yeah. It feels just so, I don't know. It doesn't feel like science fiction, these two scenes. It feels like more like abstract and like magical, because it just feels like this doesn't fit into anything. That said, I didn't hate how it looked. It visually was quite striking, like having like, because they were basically in silhouette against a striking pure white background when it went to the close-ups, and it was like, okay. And they're saying, hey, look, you failed. You don't have any information on the visitor. You can't tell us. And to be fair, he doesn't. Like, you know, his sister doesn't get to say that she's too busy dying to tell him who it is.
She's trying to sputter it out with like a broken larynx, and he's just like, stay with me, it's all okay. And she's like, shut up.
Try to tell him it's my daughter. But he never finds out. So he actually doesn't really know. I mean, he does. I mean, he probably knows it's a woman. And he knows her motive, at least the motive she claimed to him. So he could have told him that. He doesn't. And they say, well, you have to be wiped. It didn't work.
That's the other thing, is they're still asking for information at this point, which implies they could still do something about it. It's not that her final goal has succeeded in any way and it can't be undone. It's implied that, okay, if you told us something, we could have done something. But right now, you're useless to us, so...
The frustrating thing about this is if there was more follow-up with the visitor / Stephanie, and she actually just straight up said, yeah, I'm trying to get these bastards who do this experiment because it took my mother from me. And, you know, because it's like, okay, well, that could be explored upon. And if I got a more concrete kind of like, okay, these people are somewhat villainous. And the thing is, though, they do all this vague shit here where they're like, oh, we answer to people above us. We're just following orders. So we
have supervisors. They have supervisors. All of them want results.
Yeah, it's just this sort of vague, like, oh, there's a chain of command. We're not really like, we can't take responsibility or be the true villains of this because we're just flipping the switches and doing the communication on the ground. That's all we're doing. Right. And presumably the guy's in the past because he's the one leaving his voice on the tape recorder, would be my guess. And he's and he's literally on the left, which would also fit the earlier
at the time.
Earlier terminology. So it's like, okay, fair enough. And this is where the brother says, look, give me another chance. Things will be different. If you give me another chance, I can change things. I can figure things out. And this is where they say, well, you remember the morning you went into the thing? And he's like, yeah, all right. You have to kill the redundancy, meaning you have to kill the version of yourself that already exists there, but then you'll get another chance. And he's like, fine. So sure enough, he walks out the thing after they press a few buttons, and yeah, he's in that morning. He's out of the time loop, or he's out of the bubble because he's back in the real world that morning.
Yeah. And he's out of the bubble, but now he's in a time loop.
He's out of the bubble, and he's going to kill himself, the other version, so that he can go with his sister again. And all I could think was, but you're out of the bubble. Can't you just like not go back to the house now?
Not go into it. Not go into the place where they have to go.
But I think it's for some reason he does. For some reason it's implied that they keep doing it, right? Because the end of the movie is that what we think is the next thing, because he goes back to the diner, he sits down, we cut away to the two mysterious characters having a little philosophical conversation.
They're sitting there saying like, oh no, it's nice to think that he might be the one that breaks out of the cycle, but nobody ever breaks out of the cycle.
And it cuts to her arriving, to the sister Sydney arriving at the diner, and she's, let's let the start of the movie, but when she comes in, and it sort of doesn't show you the brother, she's like, who are you? Where did you get those bags of money? I'm looking for my brother. Who the hell are you? And he's talking all kind of weird, and I'm like, oh, he's older. She doesn't recognize him because he's been doing this for loops and loops and loops. And he just says, like, don't come with me. Just leave the money. Just go away. Just run.
And more specifically, take that gun and kill me. I have lived too long and done too much.
And so yeah, like the movie ends with him holding the her rifle to his head. The gun fires, and she leaves as those sirens coming. Which she might get arrested and go to prison for murdering this old man in the diner now. Like that might be where this goes.
But at the same time, it feels like it's left on a somewhat hopeful note where she does follow directions. She doesn't take the money. She doesn't do any of that. And it seems like this is somehow actually allowing the cycle to break to some extent. Yeah. Because if you think about it, if she does manage to go back to her parents, or even if she does get arrested, the daughter, Steph, now has no reason to ever come looking for the people who ruined her life, like the Vice, anymore.
But you just said go back to your parents. Did you think the parents were alive? Because I assumed they were dead.
Sorry, no, not the parents. I meant the she went back to be a parent to her daughter. And so now the daughter has absolutely no reason to come after the Vice anymore because she has no idea it exists. So it kind of did break the cycle in a way.
But only through his death. Only by him giving up.
Well, that's the other thing that I think is an interesting point, is that I think the reason he goes back into the time bubble over and over again is because he knows that these people are just uber powerful. And they even say, like, wiping means that we go back to the point of your origin, your first, like, existence, and we just get rid of that. And so the rest of the timeline will shake out as it shakes out. But, like, you will not exist anymore. Same goes for your sister. What I find interesting about that is that because he keeps going into it over and over again, that's what causes Steph to keep on becoming the visitor over and over again. If he were wiped, she would also, by consequence of her mother being wiped, be wiped as well, and the visitor problem would be solved. But because he is going back into it, it keeps the visitor problem happening.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's where it was supposed to kind of go at the end there.
You're telling me that, but I'm also not convinced that...
No, but see, so what I was saying before at the very beginning is that's my problem. Is that if we had ended this on him saying, I'll go back, things will be different, cut to black, credits, I'd have been fine. I would have been fine with the implication that he's going to be stuck in this loop over and over again doing this until the day dies. I would even be okay with showing him going and killing his past self on that first loop go around. It's that last sequence of showing that he has been in this loop for so long, he doesn't have an escape, and that he is ridiculously old now. That's what tells me that, like, all the interesting stuff, all the things I wanted to see was during that skip. It was all those times where he was going back and trying to make things different.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I think I'm disappointed it was a loop at all at the end, because the movie did not set up for that. The movie did not like give me the setup for where I was excited by them just sort of shoehorning in the idea of there being a loop at the end. Because, like we said, the movie is not a loop through and through, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't start off as a loop. One of the things about Dark that's so interesting is that there is a reason why it's a complete loop, right? There was like a weird thing that happened that caused it. But like, yeah, I mean, I guess everything points to it being a loop because of the whole daughter thing and the daughter actually sending him there in the first place. But then it's a paradox though, because then she'll never give him the book to go there in the first place.
Oh yeah, thing. No, it's absolutely a paradox. I don't doubt that is supposed to be kind of the ending of this.
So I find this like, okay, it becomes this time loop thing where he's trying over and over again. I think that's just like, it almost like just veers into a cliche or like a trope that I think is like, I have no problem with more time loop movies happening as long as that's what the focus is and as long as you play with it and really do some justice to it. But the other thing that I don't like about this is that I just like everything about who the voices on the recorder end up being. I'm like, either give me real characters who are people who have made a mistake and are trying to accomplish something by getting these people to do something to help them, or have some sort of motive. Or if you're going to do, they're just part of an evil company or something or whatever it is, then that's maybe interesting too. But you have to like go into it a bit more. it just like it skirts the surface of like 2 or 3 different things, and it makes all of them be unsatisfying by the end, is the way I felt. And that includes the daughter stuff as well. Like the daughter being the visitor, okay, cool. Then she leaves the movie, and there is nothing else about her for the rest of it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I for me, it's just ever so slightly later. I was hopeful of a thing where it is left up. What you were saying of it always had to be a loop because the daughter was there. That's the part that lapped me on it, where I'm like, okay, so the implication is that he goes back to even before the regular shows up and then like has to change stuff. So it's always been this thing where he's influencing his own life, and it is a stable time loop.
And and also just to point out here, there is an implication when he does go back here that this isn't the first time he's done this, because the campsite that they looked at the start of the movie seems to be his campsite from when he was staying here before. That was kind of the implication I got here at the end, which is kind of weird because it means he went into the house with her on this like main part of the movie, knowing some of this stuff, which didn't feel right from memory. But
yeah, I didn't even think about the campsite thing. Yeah, no, I got nothing for that. That's an extra layer of time messiness.
It feels like, oh, we're really smart. We're going to imply all these things, and I don't think it's that. Like, it has to fit into the themes, and it has to be mechanically satisfying in its own right. You can't just go off willy-nilly implying a bunch of stuff.
I'm also fine with it being just a total mystery where like the characters are kind of thrown into this world. They don't know what's going on, but it's because it tries to play both sides. It tries to say, we're going to give you hints. Somebody knows what's going on, and we're going to show you that somebody, but we're never going to let you know what that somebody knows. We're just going to tell you there is a plan, and it's in the background. It's just hidden from you, and you'll never see it.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Until I loved Lost. Lost was a great experience. There's ways to do it that's fun, and there's ways to do it that work. I think, an hour 40 movie needs to have a bit more of a focus on something that it really wants to do well. And I think it skirted like 3 different like main things that it could have focused on and made that's what this is really about. It's about what the visitor's trying to do. It's about what the evil people, if they're even evil, who are behind this loop, what are they trying to do? I mean, are they bad? Are they just trying to like make him try and break the loop because that'll solve this problem that they've got with this bubble in the first place? Or are they doing something nefarious? Or are they just doing an experiment and seeing if it ever does anything? I don't know. I have no idea.
I think the implication to me was that it was there's black and white morality, and then there's also like orange and blue morality, where it's just something that doesn't map easily to which one's black, which one's white. I think that's kind of what was coming down here, where they're doing the experiment because it's the experiment. Like it doesn't matter whether they're doing good things or bad things. They're just doing it. It's completely void of morality. But because of that, it's impacting these people like this family, and they don't care. They don't see it as a good thing, bad thing. They just see it as that's the experiment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I was getting at earlier, this idea that it's about someone just repeating their mistakes and being unable to like change is kind of what the movie is about to me.
Yeah,
but I
got that too. But that's not what the ending says. The ending doesn't give you that.
But even then, I think that could have been fleshed out a bit more. It's a really frustrating movie because it skirts a lot of really interesting themes and ideas and just kind of doesn't do enough with any of them to make it a satisfying experience. So sadly. I'm not that I had any expectations really going in, but I'm disappointed regardless.
Yeah. Well, it's because it sets up the expectations.
Yeah, it does.
Looking at the way the movie plays it out, I'd say the first half hour, because that gets you right up until like they have to figure out whether they're going to sign this thing. The first half an hour, very well done. And I would even say the section on the tape recorders is there as well. Then you got 20 to 30 minutes of the montage and showing them just sitting around. And that's where it loses me. Yeah. That's where that time could have been so much better used.
The tape recorders was great at first because I thought, oh, they're going to like there's so much they can play with here of like getting help from someone in the past who can like basically make things appear for them and sort of keep playing with that. And how do you deal with that? And how do you deal with like a villain? Assuming at first that we would consider the visitor the villain because they're against everyone else. Like, how do we play with the idea that they know how to like try and get around it? And maybe that's what their introduction represents with them, like just being out of sight behind the tree, like they're just walking through that thin veil where no one can see them, and sneaking in kind of implies everything. But you could do stuff like that, and like do stuff with how do you get around the fact that these people can see stuff? Like, do we try and lie to them and like trick them that we've done something, and leave just like maybe like pull out some teeth and leave some dental records for them to find, but no actual body kind of thing. Like, there's so many things they could do to play with this idea of like the only way that the people that we're talking to can confirm anything we've done is the stuff that's left behind years later, potentially. So how can we trick them? How can we play with that?
Right. You know what this vaguely reminds me of? Because of that exact same mechanic, The Call. That Korean film we did right at the end of the year.
A better movie than this, I would say.
It was, but it had that same sort of thing where there's a time travel element to it, one in the future, one in the past, and characters have to outsmart each other. They have to try to get to that point. But on that, it was two characters on equal footing. On this one, it was one character knows literally everything, one character knows nothing at all. So that balance of power is a little bit off there.
Yeah. But again, I think it could work as long as you play to that. But yeah. So no, sadly, I'm not coming out of this with a super high recommendation. I think it gets a little bit up its own ass, I guess.
That's fair. I think that there is something here. I think it is like above the neutral mark, but
is it in the dark?
It is something in the dirt. I'm not sure if it's this. I don't know. I just find this movie so promising, and on both sides of it, both of them being the intellectual, more mysterious science fiction side, and then the emotional stuff going on with the brother-sister bond. Neither of them hit as high as I really think that they should. I don't find either of them to be as compelling as I was promised going into it from that first act, and it just kind of lets me down by the end.
I think that's the key point here, is that all the expectations that were had were the movie itself setting them up in Act 1. It actually did a good job of getting me interested in where it was going, and then just failed to give me compelling answers or compelling just a compelling plot, basically, for the rest of the movie, which is a shame. So, all right, what is your scene of the movie, David?
Oh boy. Well, I think it's probably going to be from that first act. Not the montage.
Which montage?
Yeah, there's like several of those. I think my scene of the movie is going to be that first tape recorder bit where they play with, because we didn't even really describe the function of it either, is that they start the recording, they put it in the safe, and then that allows it to do whatever time shenanigans it has, hits the device, goes back to the past. But then the rest of the conversation is able to be played out where they just record and then play, and they don't have to set it back into the thing, which implies that the entire conversation is able to play out because they know everything that's going to be said, and so they can respond to it. But then they also know what the responses are going to be. So it's like an immediate time loop where it just fills out the rest of it all at once. But no, I think that's the most interesting, that the mechanics of all this really got fleshed out and interested in, and then it just, from there on, petered out.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the intrigue of them like messing with the clocks when they first go in. I don't know if that quite takes my scene though. I did like when the visitor first showed up, as much as that was kind of like after it had already started to dip because of all the middle of the movie montages that kind of ruined the pacing. I do think it was handled very well, and there's shots of like from inside the house as we see Sydney out of one of the windows, but we see the visitor sneaking up behind her at the other window, and it's fairly well done. Like, it's not a badly shot movie by any means. It just the script is really where I have the problems more than anything.
Yeah. I would also, just in addition to that sequence, I really did like the sequence of the Say Anything, the holding the boombox, playing the disco, because it's on its own already deeply unsettling, but then it does also add in that thing of, oh, we know this person's now related to them, or has some direct relation. Yeah.
Which again, I also feel like, okay, we can assume that somehow Steph, the visitor, found out about this from her mother, about this disco song, and figured out which one it was, and she's using that to like freak her out, so she'll stall and like miss her shots or whatever. But at the same time, I also, again, like, other than getting through the door, was there any other intention here? Because this feels very like aimed. This feels very targeted right at her mother to like trigger those memories and make her like pause. So it feels like there's something there we're not quite getting or finding out that was a little unsatisfying. All right, MVP of the movie.
Well, we're pretty limited in choice here if we're just going by characters.
Yeah, you could extend it beyond that, but
I could. I don't think I really want to, though.
No,
like,
I
nothing stood out.
I mean, I think between the two, I would lean towards Sydney of the pair, just because I think she's the one that actually cares about getting back. So, and maybe that's actually part of the problem. Maybe we should be feeling more sympathy for Joseph, so that when he's the one that has to try and like fix everything at the end, and he's like, "Damn, I messed up again." Like you should feel like, oh, he's messed up with his sister again. He wants to fix it. Maybe if I cared more about him specifically, I'd care more about him making amends for that and try to fix it. But I think because Sydney's the one that's got a daughter to go back to, and because she's the one who's determined, like, okay, you made this deal with them, we're going to kill this visitor, so I'm going to take watch, I'm going to train, I'm going to target practice, I'm going to do all this stuff. I think it makes her slightly the more compelling of the two. But there's not much in it, to be fair. I don't think it's like a huge gap.
No, yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that ultimately what that comes back to is that his compulsion, the reason he wants to escape, or at least get this dealt with, is for the sake of his sister. But I don't feel like that emotional bond was fleshed out enough. I feel like that all just went out the window in the second act. So if they had established that a little bit better to just show that he would be willing to do anything for his sister, then maybe I could have felt it a bit better. But because of that whole argument in the second act, it just kind of left me as, well, you know, they got their problems and it's not something that's going to be fixed here. So I'm going to agree. I'm going to say Sydney's probably the more interesting character out of the duo.
I suppose you could argue and say the visitor for the mystery of, okay, how are they moving outside the bubble? Because they come in from the outside, like, you know, they're clearly doing some more time travel stuff that's separate. I can only assume they figured out a way to go into the bubble and then just walk out into like past the perimeter. But you know, how? That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the bubbles are all related to the size of the objects, because obviously they have the tape recorder chained to the inside of this safe. So like the safe isn't as big as the closet, and the closet it's got its own thing. So maybe there's this ultra massive device that they've built just off the farm that she's able to walk through. I
mean, back when I was thinking that she was actually mute, I was thinking that she just tanked the pain and that it was the perimeter that destroyed her vocal cords or something like that.
Oh, that'd be possible.
But I do kind of like the idea that she's just intentionally being mute so that no one can figure out anything about her.
Yeah, who she is.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, I wouldn't give it to the visitor just because it's most valuable person, most valuable player, and I don't think she's that valuable, all things considered.
Yeah, that's fair. More of a concept than a character, to be honest, at a certain point. All right, what are you rating? Things will be different.
I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at what I gave Something in the Dirt, because again, I feel that same sort of vibe here. So that one was a 6, and I do think this one is above the 5 mark for me, but unlike Something in the Dirt, which did have some level of genre savviness over those documentary, like, mystic sort of things, I think that this one was playing it a bit more straight, so when it fails, it gets a little bit more hard to give it some credit for it. So I'm going to say this one... I think this one is probably going to be... I'm going to give it a 5. I'm just going to give it a straight 5. If I could go down to quarter notes, it'd be a 5.25. But it feels weird giving it the 5.5 for me. I don't think it quite manages to like grab that last quarter point, which is so strange to say to get that minute about it. But it's not quite there.
To sort of mix it with letter grades, you're giving it a 5+. Not
yes.
Not a 5.5, just a 5+.
A 5+, exactly.
I mean, I do think it gets a bit too, like, you know, having the quarter points.
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't want
too
that
much.
At all. Yeah.
I used to not even do half points. I only started doing half points because it got to a certain point where you've seen so many movies where I'm like, you know what, there is enough of like a scale in my head where I need those halfway marks.
Yeah, that's what I'm almost all of my most recent ratings have been done relative to other things. Like I have the positioning in my head, but if I have to give it a number, it's always going to be relative to that other thing.
Yeah, this is tough. Like, I think when this started, it was very promising. I liked a lot of the things it was setting up, but it kind of fell into the we are smart indie sci-fi movie, but we're not actually that smart, or we're, like, I just, it was very unsatisfying to me by the end. So sadly, despite all the positives, I think I have to agree with the 5. And it's a shame because I do think there was a lot of potential there. But it just it never quite lived up to it by the end. It was a frustrating experience. I was actively getting kind of annoyed actually in the last like 10 minutes of like, why are you doing this and why are you doing this? Like, you're just making this less interesting.
Right.
So it is what it is, but hey. So in a minute, David will do his homework movie for the week. But just to let you know, if you want to support the show and help keep it coming, you can do so over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonus shows that me and David do every month. We have a monthly show called Criterion Cut, where we do movies from the Criterion Collection, and we do a monthly show called Extra Reels, where we do some of the worst things ever made. Such as your Neil Breens, your Uwe Bolls, your... Maccamees, yes. And Maccamee's a sci-fi, so that's kind of like a Extra Reels sci-fi or Ace crossover. If you want to think of it that way.
It's also a crossover with McDonald's, but we didn't get paid for that.
That's very true. And I know there's some patrons who would love for all of Ace to just become Ace Extra Reels, just for all of the shit movies, but sadly we would like to try and find some good ones occasionally. So
speaking of which, what's the next movie we're doing, Pete, on Ace?
It's I mean, look, I'm sure the made-for-TV Universal Soldier 2 Unfinished Business. No, sorry, Brothers in Arms. Unfinished Business is the third one. Forgive me. I've skipped ahead of my subtitles. I'm sure it's not going to be Extra Reels worthy. The fact that there's a riff tracks for it is not a bad omen at all.
Definitely not.
That's not a bad omen.
I can't wait to give a 9.5 on this show. It's so rare.
Oh dear. And the best part is that when we were just like clarifying what we were doing next before the show, I brought up Universal Soldier 2, and David said, "Oh, it's on Paramount Plus," and I'm like, "Are you sure? I don't think it is." He's like, "What do you think Universal Soldier 2 is?" And he's like, "Universal Soldier: The Return," and I'm like, "No, that's number 4, David." If
you type in to Google just the words Universal Soldier 2, it is the first 4 results before it gets to Brother in Arms.
That should be an indication of how forgotten 2 and 3 are, but...
Doesn't it have a Busey? Isn't that the one with Busey?
It does have a Busey, yes. Gary Busey's in it. It's kind of wild as well that they did 2 TV movies for the movie channel a year before The Return came out. It's actually, like, it's shockingly close to the next, like, real theatrical one. It's really weird. Because I think in my head, I assumed it was the mid-90s, like right in the middle between the two. But no, it's right before the new one. They would have been already making the new one by the time these aired. But whatever.
You can just license out the rights to anything, I guess.
But yes, so you could look forward to that next week. So yes, and obviously check out Collector's Cut if you haven't. That's the other movie show that me and David do, where we go through franchises and director filmographies and things like that. We just wrapped up Die Hard season recently, and we're on Airport season, which was a franchise of disaster movies from the 70s. So that sounds like fun. Go check out that too. All right, David. Every week you go back and you do a movie that we did on the show before you joined. What was your homework movie this week?
Well, as of now, I am trying to get done a bunch of movies before we get to our top 2000s countdown, not 2000s, 2020s countdown. And
the decade so far is the idea. Yes.
Exactly. And I also need to catch up for Jurassic Park Rebirth. So I did Jurassic Park 2, aka The Lost World. Jeff Goldblum returns because he was absolutely the primary focus of what needed to come back there. Positives, I think that despite the fact that it is the second one, it still managed to keep up with a bunch of the special effects, the visual effects. It looks great. There's a lot of times where they're interacting, and I say this is just as good as the original. Mind you, it is 4 years later, so there has been some technological improvement where Yeah, it probably should.
And keep in mind, like, that's like 4 years in CG development's nothing now, but in 1993 to 1997 is quite a big leap, just because of how quickly things were moving for about a decade and a half there.
Right, but I still feel like they did a good job. They made some stuff that I didn't think would have been possible in the 93 version, and they made it work for them. Downsides, I was going to try to make a tortured metaphor at the beginning of this to make you question what I was doing, but I'm just going to outright say it. They did the Alien to Alien 2 Aliens route, which is first movie's about a bunch of people who can't possibly deal with this small threat. Next, we bring a military group that should be good to deal with the small threat, but the larger threat that's been introduced is just too much for them. And it's crazy how much those two things carry over between the pair of them, except for quality of writing.
Because, I was going to say, quality's a big difference here.
Yeah, that's the thing. As soon as you introduce the idea of, oh, it's an ensemble, it doesn't work, especially adding on to it. The first movie's like this anti-capitalism sort of thing going on, yet this one is a pro-nature thing going on, which is fine. I'm not opposed to the message, but at certain points it felt a little bit tortured of how much they're going to go for that. I don't want to spoil the third act, but the third act is just like, okay, that's a bit much. You did a tiny bit too much here, maybe.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. I said this in the review, which I don't know if you ever listened to that, but...
no, I don't listen to the show.
You absolutely do. You've referenced things I've said in the past. Anyway, there's like multiple major characters who just disappear at the end of Act 2 because there's no reason for them to be in Act 3, which is just a nice big signifier of just how tacked on and separate the final chunk of the movie is compared to the rest of it. It's really, really weird.
Yep. And then add on to that fact, like, I think half of Act 2 is also just kind of like, all right, we're just extending things until we get to the end. So
yeah, the middle is pretty dull. I mean, I will say this, the sequence with the big trailer is actually genuinely pretty great, but the rest of the movie is a bit of a bore, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no, as soon as it hit that trailer sequence, I was like, okay, all right, this is a great set piece. And then, like, a little bit, I think even after that, they mentioned raptors. And I'm like, oh, of course, we got to have the raptors bit. And that was possibly one of the most disappointing parts of the movie, where I was like, oh, that's it for the raptor? All right, fine, whatever.
Well, outside of some fantastic gymnastics.
Oh, of course. If you ever need to put on a movie to convince your kid to partake in gymnastics, there is exactly 6 seconds of this movie, which is just top tier. But beyond that,
from the team? There you go.
I don't know. It's a very middling movie. I still have a little bit of fun with it, but
was this your first time watching it?
No, I definitely have seen this one before, but it's been so long. And basically the only parts I remember of it are the third act and the gymnastics bit, which is not to say a good memory. So all in all, I think I'm probably going to end up with this one being... I'll give it like a 5.5. I think it's just barely over that middle mark, but that's only to say, like, I think the great moments are great, and the worst moments are almost approaching so bad it's good territory. Like, it's not actually a quality film throughout.
Yeah, they killed, like, the one likable side character too early, and then all of the other side characters, including Vince Vaughn, are just... they're just bland. There's nothing going for them. I
mean, that's just Vince Vaughn. He just lives that every day.
That's true. All right, there you go. That's another one in the books. That has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much for joining us. Like we said, Universal Soldier 2, Brothers in Arms next week. You can find it for free. It's on Plex, Tubi, stuff like that.
Take any 2 random syllables if that's a streaming service.
In fact, actually, we checked as well. It's on YouTube, I think, if you wanted. That's probably the easiest place to go watch it.
Don't report that until I'm done watching it.
It might be a legitimate thing. You don't know.
Might be.
That said, though, I say that, like, obviously they don't last very long, but the amount of times recently I've been onto YouTube and they'll be like, in my suggestions, hey, Furiosa full movie, and I'll click on it to check, and it is just the movie, and I'm like, okay, your account's getting deleted in like 10 minutes, but like, it's here.
I remember back, I don't even know how old I was, but when the Simpsons movie came out, like a week before it hit theaters, it was in full available on YouTube, and I was like, I have no interest in this, but I'm shocked it's here.
Yeah, just very, very strange. I'm assuming they're clamping down on it because but for like a little couple of months period, it feels like it's been happening a lot, and it's just really weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Keep watching science fiction and computer at Salsa.